It's a couple of days now since the R5 Mark II was announced. This is a pretty big step up from the R5. It's got a brand new 45 megapixel stacked sensor. It's got new and improved focus with some amazing features there in relation to focus. It can shoot in 8K RAW and 60 frames per second internally without the need for a battery. It's got new battery grips that you can get for it, including a cooling grip. It has new improved codecs over the previous R5. It'll let you shoot up to 30 frames per second in electronic shutter mode for photography. That's great. It has a faster rolling shutter too, and lots more. And let's talk about it now in this video. Now, I'm not going to go through every little detail on the R5 Mark II, but I will mention a few things, a few important areas and big upgrades over the R5, which I think are worth mentioning. And a big one for me is the fact that it's got a new sensor in there. A 45 megapixel stacked sensor, which has got a much faster readout than the previous R5. Okay, it's not as fast as the R3 or the new R1. Now, it's only got 12 frames per second. I say only. There's no improvement over the R5, a 4-year-old camera there. It's still got the same mechanical shutter speed, but the electronic shutter speed will do 30 frames per second.
So when I was out in the woods, I kind of forgot to talk about C-Log 2, which is crazy because that is the sort of big thing with this camera. The addition of C-Log 2 for the first time in a non-cinema camera from Canon. Yeah, look, it's exciting. I can't wait to see how it looks. And that, for me, is kind of, yeah, it's the big one, isn't it?
So a really big issue with the R5, as you probably know, is the fact that the camera overheated kind of badly, and it just felt like the camera wasn't fully usable in a lot of circumstances. Now, when they brought the R5C out, they fitted an internal fan, so you never have to worry about overheating now with the R5C, which is great, but that comes at a cost, and that cost is battery life. But with the new R5 Mark II, they've done something, I suppose you could say, clever. They've included a battery pack that has a cooling system in it. A battery grip, I should say. Now, that's not cheap, but I think it's probably the best option that they went for. Now, they have 3 battery grips for the camera. They've that one that I just spoke about, which has got the cooling fan. It's the most expensive option, and it has the Ethernet port there as well. And then it has an option without the fan, you know, with the Ethernet port, which is a bit cheaper. I don't know why you would get that one if you can get the one with the fan for about another €100. And then it's just got a straight up battery grip, which, you know, some people can get. You know, it depends on how you're going to use the camera. If you're a photographer and you're not really bothered about the cooling as much, you're not going to use it for high-end video as much, then maybe the cheaper battery pack would be the option for you. But do you need it at the start? That is the question. So, you know, when I'm going to get the R5, I'm not going to get the battery grip first. I'm going to see how that works out. I don't shoot for long periods of time in high frame rates. Maybe it will overheat instantly if you start shooting at 60 frames per second in 8K RAW. I don't know. So I think they've probably done the right thing. It's a bit fussy. You know, it's not ideal, but yeah, let's see how it works out.
So the new LPE6P battery from Canon for the R5 Mark II is coming in kind of expensive. But if it's compatible with older Canon cameras, like if it powers the R5C for a bit longer, could it be worth it? Perhaps it is.
So I'm going to go straight for the jugular here. Why is it that I want to get the R5 Mark II? Me. Why me? Here's the thing. I'm shooting now at the moment on the Canon R5C, and I also have a Canon R5, which I've had for almost 4 years now. And it's a great camera. But since getting the R5C, I do not want to take the R5 out of the bag to shoot video. I'm fine with taking it out of the bag to do photos, obviously, but I do not want to take it out of the bag to shoot video, because the R5C is just so much nicer to work with. Okay, so as I walk around here and face the camera, you will notice that the R5C is picking me up just fine. And the R5C is actually a better little autofocuser than people give it credit for. Now, speaking of autofocus, they've got this sort of action priority mode, which is optimized for certain sports like volleyball. I've heard volleyball mentioned a few times. So like team sports with balls, you know, it intelligently tracks the user with the ball. Is that something that I need? Definitely not. But if it tracks the player, whether they have the ball or not, and if it can just follow them from behind another player, if you know what I'm saying, I think that's a good thing to have. So yeah, like kudos to Canon for improving that. They've got like the best autofocus. And you see, the thing is, the R5 is quite good. And I'm actually held back more by my lens than I am the camera. The focus system in the R5 is fast enough but it's my lens that's stopping me from getting the shots, because I'm using a third party. I'm using a Sigma 500 at the moment, an f4. It's a great lens. It'll do lovely images, but it just will not focus as fast as you need a lens to focus with for smaller birds in flight. So, oh, you're grand. Yeah, ignore me. Sorry to stop you. I was filming some leaves there with the R5C, and I set it to record in 72 frames per second and then 120 frames per second. So it's in slow and fast mode on the R5C, and when you do that, you can't really use audio then. There's no audio track recorded. Now the R5C is pretty good for audio if you get the third party connection. You can record 4 tracks, which is great, but I don't really use it that way. But having said that, I would still like a little bit of audio on the higher frame rates, and I do believe that the new R5 Mark II, it'll let you record an audio file if you're going into higher frame rates. So it can do 120 in 4K. It's doing 60 as well. People are kind of confused to whether it's downsampled or if it's line skipped in 60 frames per second. Now, that's a kind of biggie, really. And if you've shot like, nice downsampled 8K to 4K, it's a much nicer looking image than when they line skip it. So that's a kind of an important one for me, to get kind of nice quality, higher frame rates for slow motion stuff. Now, one thing I quite like about the R5C is that it will let me record in a Super 16 crop in RAW at 120 frames per second. It might seem like a drastic crop on the sensor, but it's still an almost 3K image. So that's actually like, 50% bigger than a full HD image. And that makes a difference, and you get a lot of resolution. So if you're shooting on a lens, if you don't have like a wildlife lens, if you've say a 70 to 200, and you bang it onto your R5C, you can shoot in crop Super 16 at 120 frames per second RAW, and you can punch right in. So it's a great setting to have on the R5C. So I'm not sure what the Canon R5 Mark II does, but I was hoping that the crop mode would let you do, a APS-C crop in maybe more than 60 frames per second RAW. Instead of the line skip thing, they've got this line skipped 4K in RAW. I wouldn't really want that line skip, but I would love to see, even if they could have got to 96 frames per second in a crop mode, I think that would be, in RAW, I think that would be a nice feature to have on the R5 Mark II. So yeah, these are the little things that sometimes some of us would want instead of other things. Like they have this image upscaling thing in camera, and I personally just would not ever want to use that. It's just not one of these things that I like doing. I don't even use sharpening software, AI enhancement software. I don't like using it. For me, if I didn't get it in camera, I'm just not that into trying to improve it. I'd sooner retouch a photograph or something like that. I'd sooner take an image that I really like, that I took, and just work on it in Photoshop and make it into a print or something. I'd rather do that. It just, I don't know, there's something about it. Don't like it. Now, if you've watched me before talking about cameras, you'll probably know that I don't like rigging these mirrorless type cameras. Okay, it's nice to have a monitor, I get it. But it's also very good to look through the viewfinder. You have to ask yourself, okay, if you were taking a photograph, would you take a photograph better if you used a monitor or if you looked through the viewfinder? So the R5 Mark II has got a new, brighter, bigger, wider looking viewfinder in it. And I see the cup on the back looks a bit bigger as well, the eye cup. So that looks kind of cool. I've had no complaints with the R5 or the R5C. Now I hear the R1 is a bit of a better viewfinder, but I'm looking forward to seeing what it's like in the R5. So the R5 Mark II now, it's got like the larger HDMI. That's nice if I do want to attach a monitor. I probably will in certain situations, but realistically I'll use the camera on its own. Oh boy. Hello. Oh yeah, he does. Hello, Alfie. So I'm here today with, yeah, he does think it's food. Yeah, I'm holding the microphone. So yeah, don't ever hold a microphone or a dog will think it's food. It's not food, Alfie, it's not food. It's not food. Nice to meet you, okay, take care. There's so much growth here and thick vegetation and pure, lush greenery that it reminds me of the movie Predator. you ever see that movie? 1987, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers.
Billy, what did you see?
There's something out there waiting for us, and it ain't no man. We're all gonna die.
So I'm just noticing that there's a little bit of a break in the rain now, and it's getting a small bit brighter, and I'm just going to turn around my viewfinder here. Not my viewfinder, my screen. So the screen is the same on the R5 Mark II as it is on this camera, the R5C, and of course the R5 Mark I. Now, one thing I'm interested in mentioning light coming through the trees here is how will the new R5 Mark II look in low light? It's something that I'm kind of curious about. I'm looking forward to seeing the reaction there. It's not an area really that I'm caught out by. I like the 3200 ISO. I think it'll get you there, especially if you have a bright lens on the camera. I've nothing brighter at the moment than an f2.8. I'm just not that sort of user. You know, like everything else, as I've mentioned, there's certain things that I just like to see. And, you know, the need for better low light is just not something I'm coming across. Not in a work situation, not even in my own situation. So as I was shooting here with the R5C, I was making some adjustments to the focus and the frame rates. I set the aperture and changed the shutter speed. And I did it all through shortcuts on the R5C. Now, I know I'm comparing the R5C a lot to the R5, but the R5C is great for customizability that way. And the menu in there is lovely. There's just so many buttons all over it. So with one press of a button on the R5C, I can just toggle between 24 frames per second to the slow and fast motion at whatever I've set that at. If I press another shortcut button, then I can get, I can adjust my frame rates. I can toggle between 60, 72, 96 and all that. I just find the R5C very kind of hands-on, usable. Even though the cinema menu at the start was quite daunting, now I really like it. And going back to the photography style OS that's going to be in the R5 Mark II, it's a little bit more clunky again. This look isn't a comparison between the R5C and the R5 Mark II. And if you're coming from an R5, the R5 Mark II, it's going to be better for video, obviously. But it's not going to be as kind of good in lots of areas as the R5C. So I've just taken out the Osmo here for this little section. The Osmo being a stabilized camera. Speaking of stabilization, see how I did that? The Canon R5 Mark II, there seems to be slight improvements over the Canon R5. Now, I hear rumours that there's less of that kind of pincushion type corner kind of movement. Now, that's something that's quite welcome, I think. Now, I will say, however, I've kind of gotten used to the R5C's lack of IBIS, and the lens, the lens does a lot too. And when you're holding the camera still, the lens will actually pretty much hold the image still. If you want to do movement in the shots, yes, of course, IBIS and the lens together will, work harmoniously. Now, the joystick on the R5 Mark II apparently is slightly bigger and chunkier than the R5's one. Now, that's an interesting thing, because recently when I was in Spain, I picked up my camera, my R5, and I went to shoot something with it, and I noticed that the joystick was jammed. Got back from Spain, I rang my local camera dealer. I said, I need to get my joystick sorted on the camera. He said, drop it into me. A job came up and I just couldn't get in with my camera, so I just kept using it without the joystick. And one day I just picked up the camera and the joystick was free. It just fixed itself. So there could be a reason. There could have been a few of them that might have been returned back, and Canon just decided to fix that on the R5 Mark II. So that's nice to know as well. And while I traverse this little grassy pathway, why not discuss whether or not you guys should get yourself an R5 Mark II? Should you upgrade? Should you get an R5C instead at a much cheaper price point? Or should you just hold on to the old R5 or get a second-hand R5? Well, I think if you're a photographer doing general photos, say if you've got you want to do a little bit of street photography, you want to do, shots for social media for companies, perhaps you're doing a bit of photography work, maybe a little bit of wildlife, whatever, a mixture. The R5, trust me, and I have one for 4 years, the The R5 is amazing. Its focus is amazing, particularly if you have, you know, those lenses, the RF lenses. It's just really good. You will not need the new features that the R5 Mark II has. If, however, you know, you're a seasoned professional and you're doing very, very kind of high profile work in which you're shooting sports events, maybe you're a professional wildlife photographer, and you're just constantly, you know, working with cameras and you're making money from it, well then perhaps you could look at upgrading as well. Me, in my situation, like I'm a videographer, I need 2 video cameras. So the fact that I'm not actually picking up the R5 and then I'm trying to do everything on the R5C because I just so much prefer the R5C, well then yeah, I'm a contender to get the R5 Mark II. Now, if money is an object, if you're not that plush with cash and you want to up your video game from the R5, well then an R5C, trust me, you're gonna love it. Even though the focus is going to be a little bit trickier to work around. Now, it does have face tracking that works fairly well, as you've probably seen in this video, but it's a big step up for video over the R5. I just think overall photography and video, I think the R5 Mark II is the best of them all. The new sensor, the C-Log 2, the fact that it's got, you know, cooling battery grip that you can buy. It's $5,000 here in Europe. I can get that for 4 after tax, which is actually kind of reasonable. So if I sell my R5 for about 2, that leaves me with, oh yeah, hello. That leaves me with another 2 to cough up, 2K. The possibility of getting a C400 Mark II as well. Mark 1, there is no Mark II C400. A C400, I'm just thinking Mark II with the R5. You know, if I can get my hands on one of them, I think they'd be great for content for YouTube as well. I think you guys would really love watching videos on the R5 Mark II and the C400 as well.
Thanks for watching the video, guys, and if you haven't subbed already, please do. But more importantly, let me know what you think of the Canon R5 Mark II. Are you going to get your hands on one? If so, leave a comment down below in the comment section. Give me a thumbs up if you can. And until the next video from me, it's over and out, and I'll see ya.